everybody. This is the progress report for this Wednesday in mid-July, and we've only got 2 more shows here in this progress report.
Well, 3 if you count this one.
If you count this one, right? This one's
Don't
this
give it
one's
away
this one's
already,
going
you
to
know.
be a fine show too, I believe. We have an excellent guest that's new to us and new to running for office, but he's a guy with I think a lot of things interesting about his life, and we'll learn about what he hopes to do as an elected official if he succeeds, becoming the Ward 1 alderman, assuming that Kevin Kavanagh is stepping down from that position to run for mayor, which seems to be the case. So there we are. We'll be winding down, and I wanted to turn over to my very good friend and longtime partner, going on almost 14 years.
I've known you for longer than that, but
Well,
we've
in terms of the show.
we're in our 14th year. We've done almost. Come December, it would have been 14 years.
Yeah.
But I was thinking back. We missed a week because of the 4th of July, the Independence Day holiday.
Yeah, we did.
But 2 weeks ago, when you were trying to announce it and you couldn't even bring yourself to say the words, and then I says, "Oh, I can do this," and I had a hard time. It's actually kind of a bittersweet thing. I hope we've done some good stuff on the show over the past years. I hope I know we've brought some excellent guests.
We did
certainly
have many excellent and interesting guests, and some were controversial. Some just had a whole lot to offer because of their life's work. I don't want to start mentioning names because we could go on and on.
Well, we
on.
could go on. What's
And,
50 weeks times 14 years?
It's been 14 years. We've had some wonderful guests. Some are really serving our community and have for a long time and continuing to serve it very well. It's been our pleasure to bring these people forward to you to understand that government is all of us working for each other. That's what it is. And the people that step up to take the chance and risk themselves to be approved by the voters, I think they deserve a lot of
They should be
credit.
admired, not
They should be
not
admired.
vilified.
They should be not admired, not vilified. They don't do it for the money. That's for
Not here in New Hampshire. That's
not in New Hampshire, not in the New Hampshire legislature, God forbid, and even really not in the municipal office as
come on.
well. Although that's a little more generous than the legislature, but not. It's just really inspiring.
pennies
to see
per
this.
hour if you work it out, Bob. It's
Darn
pennies
right.
per hour.
Darn right. So you had something you wanted to lead off with?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit to remind folks that yes, we are winding down. We're gonna we've got 3 shows left, including this one. The last 2 shows we're kind of going to try to put together kind of a retrospective, bring some old guests on.
Yeah, that's what we'd like.
Maybe not hit the hardball stuff like we're going to do today, So, but I do want to talk before we get to the local stuff. I want to continue my ongoing rant. I know that there are good people out there who all their lives have voted Republican. All their lives there were occasionally good Republicans to vote for, but it's just not the Republican Party we used to see. And I've got 2 examples. We have a senator. Fortunately, we don't have a senator. Alabama has a senator called Tommy Tuberville, former football coach, very popular. I guess when you win football games, your reward is you get to become a senator. I can remember a time when that was...
It didn't quite work out. Didn't quite work out for that guy from Georgia last time that was Trump endorsed. Well, who was he?
Well, but in any event, we do have a couple videos, and this is... kind of the reason I selected these 2 videos. They're very short. We're going to do them one at a time, then we'll come back, and then we'll go to the second one. They're very short. The reason I selected them is because the issues and the way that the issues are dealt with are bigger than just this one guy. These are issues that go throughout the Republican Party, all the way down to the local guys here in New Hampshire, the guys that you see before us and that come after us. Mm-hmm. All of the, they don't speak out against this. Perhaps they silently agree with this stuff. And that's the other point I want to make, is that this has been going on for a while. This guy has been doing this for several weeks now, if not months on the hold that we'll see. Nothing coming from the Republicans in the Senate or the House saying it's a bad thing. Harming our military and being racist. A couple bad things, in my opinion. So, Brendan, if you wouldn't mind, let's run the first one, the white supremacy one.
Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville is coming under fire for not clearly calling white nationalism what it is, racism. And that is drawing criticism from both sides of the aisle. Last night, Tuberville appeared to walk back some of his comments when he was pressed by our Scott McFarland on Capitol Hill.
Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville first sparked controversy with these comments in May.
Do you believe they should allow white nationalists in the military?
Well, they call them that. I call them Americans.
And then reignited it Monday night.
My opinion of a white nationalist, if somebody wants to call him white nationalist, to me is an American.
Drawing a scathing rebuke from the Democratic leader in the Senate.
This is deadly serious stuff. And for a member of the United States Senate to speculate about what white nationalism means as if it's some benign little thought experiment is deeply and terribly disturbing.
Late last year, the Republican Party was forced to respond when former President Donald Trump had dinner with white nationalist Nick Fuentes. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell again made it clear where he stood after Tuberville's comments.
White supremacy is simply unacceptable in the military and in our whole country.
As GOP senators were faced with this question throughout the day.
But do you agree that white nationalists are racist?
If you're a white nationalist, absolutely.
When we caught up with him late in the day, Tuberville clarified his comments.
What is a white nationalist?
White nationalist is somebody that thinks that they should be the only ones in this country, okay?
Racist all the time.
Right, racist. That's what I'm saying.
In a separate controversy, Senator Tuberville has placed a hold on senior military officer promotions and appointments, saying he's doing so in protest of a Pentagon policy that pays for the time off and travel for service members who seek abortion services. Jarika?
All right, Scott McFarland on Cap.
Well, there you have it. From May, we're in the middle of July. And what I see has happened is he has acknowledged that white nationalists are racist, but has not said they shouldn't be in the military. So he's still, they're still Americans in his book.
Isn't he the guy that's held up a whole bunch of military?
We're going to get to that. Yes,
okay.
He is the same guy, and so the first component. I'm trying to take a bigger picture look. Is, folks, you don't have to buy into this. If you're going to vote Republican, this is part of the party. It's this racist thing that is up and down the party. If you support it, you may not believe it yourself, but then how can you support it, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Right.
So now let's turn to national defense and the military.
That's where we should.
Same guy.
Yeah, same guy.
The Senate has these weird rules where if one guy gets upset, one guy can bring a halt to all the work of the Senate, and that's what this one guy has done. And for several weeks, if not more, he has one guy. This isn't a filibuster where they all get together. This is one guy putting a hold. It's like a little pink card that you go and put on the desk, and nothing can happen.
Which they can do with judicial nominees in their state.
And people may not realize this, but to be a high-ranking military officer, it takes an act of Congress. They joke about that, but it's a real thing. When you get that brass, it's an act of Congress. You get a commission from the United States of America.
Yep.
And it's been going on since George Washington. This guy has held up all of that congressional action, so we now have military positions. People retire, the positions go unfilled, they go filled by temporary people. There's money implications, there are travel implications. People don't know where they're going to be assigned, they don't know where to put their families in school. But this one guy is upset. And so he's taking the thing he's upset about, which has nothing to do with the military in reality, and he's taking it out on the military. So Brendan, if you can run that film.
Well, the U.S. Marine Corps is without a confirmed leader for the first time in 100 years. A confirmation is being blocked by a Republican senator.
Smooth and timely transitions of confirmed leadership are central to the defense of the United States and to the full strength of the most powerful fighting force in history. And stable and orderly leadership transitions are also vital to maintaining our unmatched network of allies and partners.
And General David Berger stepped down. His assistant, Eric Smith, has been nominated to be his successor and will now lead the Marines in an acting capacity. Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama has stalled all senior military nominations. He disagrees with a Pentagon policy that funds travel for service members seeking reproductive care, including abortion.
Well, again, remember that big on defense, all that business from the Republican Party? A bunch of hooey.
And they were the one that defended law enforcement, against the...
Well, we can get to that. I'm probably not going to. We're literally out of time with the program in our lives. We will not get to it. So this may be the last time I take a swipe at the other party. But what I'm really trying to do is, folks, the good folks, the middle of the road people, the old-time Republicans, take a look. Just take another look. Be open. And take a look at what is really going on over there. There's a lot of bad stuff happening, and we really need you to do the right thing and help us save democracy. Remember that old bumper sticker, "It's the economy, stupid"?
Yeah.
I'd like to get some bumper stickers printed up, "It's democracy, stupid."
That would be a good idea.
Because that's where we are.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Yeah, I think.
But all right, enough. We've talked national. I've had my chance to vent off. I'm good for another week. I won't, lose my cool, I hope. Thanks for watching that, folks. But let's turn to the issue at hand. Some local politics. A great local guy who wants to
we are very
get involved.
pleased today to have a local candidate who's going to make his candidacy official by going down to the city hall and signing up as a candidate for Ward 1 alderman, and that is Bryce Kaw-uh.
Yes. Good for you, Bob.
And Bryce came prepared. He brought me his card. There it is. In his card, he has right on it, how to pronounce his name. It's spelled KAW-UH. And then he has in parens -cow, COW, there it is up there. Okay. That's very thoughtful. And I think we have a very thoughtful guy who's aspiring to become part of the governing body of the great city of Manchester. And you're going to be our last guest in the traditional format we've used for so many years, and we're very happy to have you here. So, tell us about yourself, what your background is, why you're in Manchester, what you've done in Manchester, and what makes you think you could be a good public servant by being elected Ward 1 alderman.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. And, I'm glad to be on here before you guys wind down the show. It's been nice to check in every now and then what you're up to, and I'm glad to be here in person this time. So, my name's Bryce Kaw-uh, and I am running for Ward 1 alderman. It is not yet official because I haven't filed the paperwork at City Hall, but I did.
You got your petition signed,
I did.
right?
Yep. So I have decided to go the route of filing via petition because to me, politics is about the people we serve, and I think it's really important to have those conversations with people.
As opposed to paying a fee.
As opposed to paying a fee. Not to say
that's
that.
very interesting. I'm not sure a whole lot of candidates do that. But it sounds very pro-democratic.
It's not the biggest fee in the world, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It won't break the bank.
No.
So
you're
actually asking for a little extra work if you want to do it by petition.
You're getting some campaign workers maybe in your dossier too.
I have learned over the course of this process why people have campaign managers. I wasn't entirely sure, for example, alderman at large, mayor. I was not entirely sure why, they needed these full paid positions, multiple paid positions even, but even just getting ready to run for a ward-specific office, I have found that there is actually quite a lot of work going on in the background that you have to be prepared to do. So I've managed to get enough petitions certified by the city clerk's office. You need 100 to run for alderman. You would need 200 to run for mayor. And so tomorrow at 4 p.m., I'm planning to go down to City Hall and make it official and sign the assent to candidacy form.
Well, good for you. Since you brought it up, do you have a campaign manager now?
I do not. That is me. If you want to reach out to my campaign manager, just email me directly.
Okay. Are you planning to get a campaign manager?
No, not for this race. I think in order to have a campaign manager, in order to have any sort of campaign staff, I would want to be able to pay them adequately for the work that they do.
Yeah.
And given that it's such a small local race, there's just not the money for that type of gig.
Well, small local races make a big difference, and many of them, you gotta come up probably with a campaign.
True.
They're getting expensive.
A campaign budget of some amount, right?
Yeah, so all the aldermanic candidates are going to try to raise a bit of money, and donations are always helpful. However, I also believe that it's kind of a test to see if you're ready for the type of work that being an alderman entails. Are you willing to go out and talk to the voters, knock doors, try to get to really know what issues matter to your community? And that's not something that you can pay someone to go do for you. I mean, I guess you can. You could hire pollsters, whatever, if you're in
You
a big
certainly
race. But
can.
there's a
But you're
different
probably going to
aspect
need
to it.
campaign signs, maybe a mailing or two.
Yeah, so campaign signs, those are going to go out on Sunday if anybody would want one. I think you have a photo of my campaign signs.
Yeah,
and,
Brendan, why don't we put that up?
Yeah. So anybody can feel free to
That's a nice sign.
get in touch with me. And I have about 25 of them that I already have allocated. Another 25 are available. But yeah, I guess I can go back and talk a little more about who I am and why I even want to run in the
Well,
first
yeah,
place.
we're getting ahead. We're already talking about the
We're
signs.
talking
Bob,
about the
but
campaign, and we
Yeah.
want to hear about your
I'm going to give our
your
spiel.
motivation, your passion, and why
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
want to be a public.
We always talk about
elected official.
everything that goes on in Manchester. Manchester is a volunteer city. Nothing would happen in this city if it weren't for all the volunteers. And among volunteers, I include the people who run for public office because, they may have a little stipend that comes their way now and again, but it's really a labor of love. So that's why we always want to start the show with as much personal information as you're willing to give us. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah,
We want to know
absolutely.
who you are.
Yep, so currently I'm serving as the city's planning board chair. I've been on the planning board since 2020, and I've really enjoyed the experience. I've been able to really dive into where Manchester has been, where it is now, and what's coming down the pipeline. You hear, certain figures thrown around by various other candidates and also by the news talking about, 2,000 housing units in the pipeline. Maybe that'll help with our housing crisis. Those are the sorts of things that on the planning board you actually deal with face to face. And try to make a difference in improving the various proposals that come before you. But I've also seen, being on this board, that there are a number of issues facing our community that we don't really have the authority to dabble in. And there are things such as, getting the sort of incentivizing more housing production, changing our zoning regulations, etc. We have a slight say, but then other things like getting us onto community power, which has worked really well for some of the other communities.
Yeah, we're way behind on that,
And
in my
we-
opinion.
No, you're preaching to the choir over
So,
here with that.
Stuff like that, that's the purview of
Big
the Board
issue,
of Mayor and
big
Aldermen.
issue.
Yeah, especially with prices so high. And when you look at cities, whether they are Keene, that's going it alone, or others who are part of a coalition, they've all seen success at reducing rates.
So glad you're bringing that up.
And also improving the proportion of renewable energy that they're bringing to the table. So that's stuff that actually is actionable on a local level.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. Other things are just improving the designs, like the standards we're using to create our streetscapes. You hear every now and then about a pedestrian getting hit, or you might want to go out and ride your bike on the street. But for me personally, at least, it doesn't feel safe, not yet. And I think we have a lot more work to do in that regard. And again, that is the purview of the BMA. They can help direct those policies, figure out how we can accommodate, yes, the cars, but also the other people who are, wanting
Yeah.
to ride their bike or want to walk on the
Right.
sidewalk.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your background. How long have you been in Manchester?
Yep.
Why do you have this unusual name? And, what you do in life and what your interests are, other than perhaps what you've talked about in policy.
Sure thing. Yeah, so I've been in Manchester since I graduated college in 2017. I moved up here because I met my partner in college, and he was born and raised in Manchester, and his parents still live here. So we decided to move up to be closer to family. I got my start working in software engineering here, and that has been a really good experience. I worked for BAE Systems first, and now I work for Fidelity Investments, and both have been really good companies to work for. I'm really enjoying my gig now, and I think that, in terms of the economic opportunities that we have in Manchester for young people, it's pretty good. I think we could improve certain aspects of that, like rent is a lot. My friends who aren't in Manchester but maybe want to move to Manchester can't always afford it, et cetera, et cetera. But that's going back to policy. My last name, for going to one of your other topics, it's Kaw-uh, and it does not sound at all the way it is spelled, but that's because my dad was born in Thailand and moved to the U.S. when he was 5. So he's a naturalized citizen. He grew up in California, but then joined the military when he was done with college. And so as I was growing up in my family, we were moving all over the place every 2 to 3 years, which was hard at times, having to uproot yourself and make new friends, but it also taught me a lot about the world. I managed to live in a bunch of different states and also 2 different countries. I lived in South Korea for a couple of years in elementary school, and also graduated from high school while living in Turkey. So I spent the last 3 years of my high school career on an American base in Turkey. Well, not all on base. We get to go off and visit the community. But it's definitely a unique experience. And all that aside, it's kind of funny. Being in Manchester, this is the longest I've ever lived in a place. This is more than twice as long as anywhere I've ever been somewhere. And I'm not really itching to move. I love the city, and I've gotten to know a lot of really good people here. And I think the city has so much, I guess you would just call it grit, and so much ability to bounce back from whatever challenges it faces.
Well, we've done it in our history many times where things seemed really dire, whether it was the closing of the Amherst-Gate, the flood in 1936.
We've bounced so many times we forget where back is.
we have come back a lot.
Yeah.
And that we do have some resilience.
It's a reinvention too.
Yeah.
What the city it invented itself. It was nothing. It was a stretch of river, and a guy said, "I can put a canal here."
Yeah.
You know, and then we became the biggest textile producer in the world, and then that failed. Who would have thought that could happen? And then we reinvented, fortunately, I think, being on planning, I was on the Heritage Commission, our city fathers were wise enough to keep the mill yard intact, to keep the identity and character
And that
of the
was
city
not a guaranteed
intact.
thing. But
Absolutely
it was
not.
a close call. We had some serious losses of great treasures, which we all lament, like our old railroad station, for my favorite example. But, we did, by and large, save our mill yard. And thank God. Look what a huge success that's turned out to be in every way. Every way.
Yeah, and talk
The
about
best
reinvention.
is yet to come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about reinvention and look at what's happening with all the biofabrication that's happening down there.
Yeah.
The new, Army initiatives and the Build Back Better grant that was received by the city.
Yeah.
It's fantastic stuff. So I'm really excited to see what the future holds. But with all of that, we have to be looking forward as well. We have to be thinking about how can we anticipate these new challenges that are going to be coming up. What can we do to make sure that we're building the best Manchester possible?
Yeah.
And those things don't happen by accident, which is part of why I'm running. I really want to bring a more proactive voice and a more proactive perspective to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, where we can hopefully really get things moving.
So you've talked a lot about your reasons why you're happy to be in Manchester and planning to stay here a while and be an elected official if it all works out. What are the major problems that you would want to have the board address if you're part of that?
Right. So one of the top issues, actually, probably the 90%, 90% of the people I talk to at the doors, they're talking about homelessness. They're talking about affordability of housing. Those are the real top issues right now facing people in Manchester from what I've gathered at the doors, and also talking even just with friends on an anecdotal basis. So that's one of the issues I would really like to see us address a bit more proactively. I've been really glad to see the new engagement center coming up. I think the change in approach is really needed because what we've been doing has not been working, and I think that the key to success with such a center would be to measure, how many people are able to take advantage of its services, and is there some sort of throughput? Are people coming in and then being placed in housing or being, led to the various services that they need to get back on their feet? So I am really looking forward to the data that I know the city's homelessness initiatives director is collecting. I really hope we can get some, maybe a 6-month progress report, that sort of thing. Hey, progress report. I just would like to see that sort of formalized. Is it working? Is it not? But regardless, I think that that issue is number one. That's on the top of people's minds.
Yeah.
And it's very visible.
It is absolutely
It's very visible.
And it's really tricky because it's such a complicated problem. It touches so many different issues. One thing that I'm glad to see in Manchester is that it has a long history of recognizing that certain issues of public health and safety are health issues and not, criminalization issues. People who are dealing with substance use disorder or people who are on the streets. Sometimes it's the same person, but they're not going to be helped, and society isn't going to be helped if we just criminalize whatever is happening, if we just beat them down. We have to figure out how can we bring them up? How can we make sure that they're able to get back on their feet? And so I know there's been criticism about the Safe Station program. I think it was very well intentioned, and I think a lot of good was done through that. I think this the engagement center, again, is going to get a lot of criticism, but I think it also has the potential to do a lot of good at really improving people's lives.
Now, when you talk about the engagement center, is that the same thing as the doorway program?
No, it's a separate thing, yeah.
This is a city setup thing. It came following on the additional housing that they put in for the winter when that was closing.
Okay.
It came
Yeah,
following
yeah,
on
yeah.
that to have a central place. It's over in Granite Square. Tell us
Yeah, so
a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so the planning board receives presentations every now and then from the planning director and the director of homelessness initiatives. So they set up a homeless shelter. It was initially a winter homeless shelter at 39 Beach Street.
Right.
You know, going back to the proactiveness, the city has not necessarily always had a shelter ready for when we need it most in the winters.
It's been a big criticism that I've put out here on the show. It's, you've got to have something. You really have to step up. I know it costs money, but we have to do it.
And it does cost money, but it also saves lives. And I think with the shelter that they stood up at 39 Beach Street, they have extended its duration in part because certain like state and federal assistance was running out for people who were staying in hotels, for example. Where are they going to go if they can't stay in those hotels? Well, they're going to wind up back on the street unless we keep a certain shelter open. And so 39 Beach Street has been, they're keeping it open for, I don't know exactly when the timeline is for that, but they're keeping it open throughout part of the summer at least. And they also added on recently an engagement center, which is kind of a catch-all term for a place where they hope to bring folks in, even if they're not staying at 39 Beach Street, is my understanding, that you can come in off the street and get connected to the services you need. Because that's the whole point, is to engage the homeless community and bring people in, get them started, and help them up, get going again. But I think that it's a great start. We have plenty more to do, but at least now we're doing something. We can point fingers all day at who's responsible for what, whether it's the state, whether it's the city, whether it's the federal government. But at the end of the day, if you have a chance to improve people's lives, I think you ought to take it.
Yeah. So in regard to the homelessness thing, one more thing. You're thinking about this a lot, you can tell that. Do you think the city's going in the right direction with its approach, or it just needs to be supported and expanded, or do you have new ideas for how to address the homeless issue that maybe haven't yet been tried?
Yeah, so one of my criticisms of the current approach, and perhaps it's not as current anymore, but the practice of the city of sweeping various camps and then the camps just get set up again somewhere else.
Sure, whack-a-mole.
Yeah, exactly. To me, that doesn't show a lot of foresight, because what's going to happen to those folks who are already incredibly vulnerable and in dangerous situations? What's going to happen if you sweep them from this one established place? They're just going to set up somewhere else.
Yeah.
And if during the COVID situation, I think they let at least one encampment just kind of exist for a little while, and they provided trash cans and whatnot.
Some police.
Yeah, some police, and they would check in. That is certainly not an ideal way for people to live, but if we don't have public housing of some sort to help them into, taking a housing first model, for example, which is something I support, but we don't have that housing available at this point. It would take a significant
if you're going housing first, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, so it's, especially with the municipal budgets the way they are in Manchester, I think it's a data supported model. However, without those structures in place, at least what we could do is allow them to stay in a designated place, where if they are either unable to get into a shelter or unwilling to go into a shelter, they can at least be somewhere that is considered safer than just trying to push them into the woods. That doesn't make sense to me. So that's one of the things.
What are you talking? I've seen news reports of some usually larger cities who have more resources setting up encampments where they're organized almost like a camping area. Where there's easy transportation in and out, there's water, there's some electric available.
Yeah.
I've seen others where they've gone to something more substantial, where they have little small houses kind of situations in like neighborhoods.
Yeah.
We couldn't do anything like that with the kind of budget that we're working with. We're working with very small numbers, but would you be talking about a piece of municipal property where you would open it up, or would it be organized?
Those are great questions, and as one person, I couldn't commit to anything regarding those specific options, because it would require so many stakeholders to get involved. From my perspective, at least, I think what you're saying about the municipal parcel, like you have some unused property somewhere, I'm sure, in the city that can be connected through, let's say public transportation to whatever services that folks need. Now, the Beach Street shelter sort of solves some of that problem because people don't need to be in tents; they can go inside. But again, if that shelter is full,
not 100,000 beds there,
right?
Or
So
whatever the number is.
Yeah, so I think that option of, say, whether it's an underutilized parking lot or some other undeveloped parcel that the city owns, I really think that would be worth exploring. I think Alderman Long from Ward 3 has looked at that before. I don't know the status of it or if it was deemed unfeasible for a certain reason, but I think that would make more sense than just sweeping them from place and place after place. I just don't think that makes sense.
Okay. So there's a big issue you've obviously thought about and got some good insights on. What about some other ones? One thing we always think about is everybody across the state, and I'm sure it's true here too, we have a terrible problem with just, affordable housing, not just to house the homeless, but to house, the people we need here to do a lot of the jobs that we need done. And housing is not available within the guidelines of how much of your income you should spend to live in this community. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so affordable housing is one of my biggest ticket items, and on my website I actually describe it as housing abundance, because I think we really need to flip the script on what we're talking about. We keep talking about a housing shortage, and I want to get us to a place where we have built enough housing of all kinds for people, whatever stage of life they're in, that we can have a housing abundance. And I think that would really help with, first of all, the scarcity, of course, but also when you have more supply, when you're dealing with a resource like housing, having enough supply really does also help with the cost. So I think the ongoing land use code rewrite, I really wish we had more progress at this point. And we could launch into the public hearings for that and have the ward level meetings. It's not there yet, but I think that's a really good opportunity for the city to cut some of that unnecessary restriction on what type of housing can be built and where, because that is a big limiting factor. And if
what do you actually mean by that?
Sure.
What do you, Bob? I get squeaky when we start talking about that. San Francisco has no zoning. No zoning whatsoever. You can build anything.
San Francisco, I know. Houston didn't.
San Francisco has no zoning.
I did not know that. Okay.
It can happen. You can build a world-class city with no zoning. Is that what you're talking about? That you buy a piece of property and you can put anything you want on it, build property line to property line. I mean, that would certainly, if we could do that, we could build bigger houses, more rooms. We could go a long way to solving the housing crisis. I've been called a snob because I think that there should be different kinds of neighborhoods in a city. That's what makes a city vibrant. You have some neighborhoods that are very built up, you have some neighborhoods that are less built up, and you have some neighborhoods that are quite spacious for the wealthy folks. I mean, I don't see why that's a problem.
Well, so first, I'm not very familiar with San Francisco's situation. I knew about Houston. I would be very surprised if San Francisco doesn't have zoning.
Well, when I was out there, that's what I was told.
Well, okay. I'm surprised too, Mike. We may have to.
When I was out there, I was in San Francisco.
Houston was the great example of a major big city.
Yeah, so
very big city with no zoning. Not San Francisco.
Well, I was asking, why is that building there? And what I was told is, well, because we have no zoning, and that's what you get. So maybe I'm wrong.
I think that may have been a tongue-in-cheek remark at that point.
Well, I'm a gullible guy, so I could have been
so
fooled.
I guess I could say anything on this show. Wow.
But let's you can if you want. Let's use Houston. My point remains the same. What are you thinking when you talk about these changes to housing? I'm very curious because, like I say, I have a bit of an opinion on it.
Right. So what I'm talking about is, for example, if you take any of the existing buildings that are downtown in the central business district, and you want to convert it, say it's currently office space, but you want to convert it into housing, you're almost guaranteed to need a variance from the Zoning Board of Adjustment in order to even do that.
Yeah, I understand. I've been through the process trying to convert one business to a different business. Oh my God, that'll be $250,000. Thank you.
And part of it is the uncertainty. So something that I've come to understand is that when developers are looking at a potential project, they don't like risk. And the more little hurdles you set up, even if they're surmountable, they often, eventually you might say, I'm not going to pursue this because there's a 5% or a 10% chance that they could turn me down, and I'm just not going to pursue it. Another thing is we have so much older housing stock in the city that's, multifamily. Maybe it's a triple decker, maybe it's a duplex, but those would actually be illegal to build today in the same spot if it wasn't existing yet. So, if it burns down, you could rebuild it, sure, but if that parcel had nothing on it today, you couldn't build it there. And you could go to the zoning board to say, hey, can you give me a variance for this? They might give it to you.
Well, you got those 7 requirements.
Yeah, you have a variety of different requirements, and then people will get upset because you're supposedly changing the character of their neighborhood, which, of course, is, people are right to be concerned about where they live. And but I think that going back to allowing some of the more missing middle types of housing is really important because, first of all, we are in this housing crisis. If you're going to say, aesthetics outrank, people's right to live in housing, I don't think that would fly. But at the same time, I think we do need to pay attention to, what type of character do we want to establish in a specific neighborhood. For example, where I live in the North End, I love all the trees. It feels really nice to be there because I can look at all the greenery. However, the zoning doesn't protect that. I could cut down all the trees on my property as far as I'm aware. I could cut them down, wouldn't conflict with zoning. So our zoning doesn't protect that aspect of character that I care most about.
Maybe we should have some protection for that because trees make it an urban.
Maybe we could, but there are also some pretty large houses up in the North End, and would you know if it was a duplex? Or would you know if there were actually 3 units subdivided in there, if it was the same size on the outside, still looked like that house?
Well, yeah, you would, because there'd be 65 cars parked on the front lawn.
There are already cars parked all over.
Well, then maybe they are. Maybe they're,
So, yeah, that just, when we're looking at how can we change our zoning, it's more about, reducing some of the restrictions that aren't really as necessary. Another thing is if we're trying to improve density downtown, are we going to force people to build as many parking spaces? So right now, Manchester's pretty lucky, in my view, that we don't have a parking shortage. You might not be able to always park on Elm Street.
Oh, we definitely don't have a parking shortage.
Yeah.
I think we're too generous in favoring parking over. Well, I want to talk to you about that too. How can we make the city more, pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly, and
and
rail commuter friendly.
That is another thing too. I'm a big supporter of commuter rail. I've written about it in the Manchester Ink Link. I think it just makes sense, and it's a misnomer really to call it commuter rail at this point because the new perspective on rail transportation is that it can be regional passenger rail. People, after COVID, we're not commuting for our jobs as much as we were in the past. If somebody has a job in Boston, oftentimes they can do it from home, go in once or twice a week. But there are so many cultural amenities in the Boston area, for example, that people from Manchester could go participate in.
Not to mention amenities that people from Boston might want to see up here.
If they want to
come. A lot of very bright young people in Cambridge, Boston.
Yeah.
We got jobs that they might want to do here. They may not want to do them if they have to drive up, or if they were on the train, they can work on their computers.
Yeah, so, it goes both ways. People can go down, people can come up, and there are higher paying jobs, here that folks who are maybe in the Boston area, maybe they're in Lowell or wherever along that route, they could come up here. And it also would facilitate better transportation between Nashua and Manchester, which right now, really the only way to get to and from is if you take a car, even though we're the 2 largest cities in New Hampshire.
Have no rail service.
Yeah, so...
passenger rail.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really sad. And I've always been a huge advocate of making the city more, you want people living in your downtown core. People want to be there. There's a vitality when people are walking around at night looking to have an interesting place for a meal or an interesting coffee shop to visit, and
a little entertainment.
All of
that. Little entertainment. That's
Yeah,
what
little
Manchester is doing.
entertainment.
Oh, and by the way, that also brings in people from outside the city, and it also would bring people up on a train if we had one.
The catchphrase is, walkable mixed-use urbanism, and it's a great thing for cities to embrace because it is a very lively combination. Commercial and residential is inherently compatible because you need people to shop at the stores, to work at the stores, and people who live in a city, they want those amenities. Now, going back to the zoning thing real quick, something I neglected to mention is it's not all about, changing the character of a neighborhood or whatnot. You have certain areas of the city, for example, that are zoned exclusively for business. Let's take the South Willow corridor, or up along Hooksett Road in Ward 1, or on the west side there are other, there are certain
Second
spots.
Street.
Exactly, where it's just businesses. But who's to say you couldn't have businesses along with housing up above? We embraced that model in the Central Business District downtown. It's starting to really take shape here, but there's no reason why, in such a housing shortage, that we need to say, no, the residences have to stay completely separate from the stores. Like, why would we do that? So,
It's kind of funny, the conversation. I'm reminded, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So, I mean, you've been working on the planning board.
Oh,
and
yeah,
doing a lot of land use talk. But I do want to ask a little bit about what's been going on the South Elm Street area. It's that when I was a little kid, the mayors were talking about one day, Elm Street's going to not stop at Lake Ave anymore, it's going to go all the way down to South Elm. And we're seeing some of that developing. We're seeing some residential development. We're seeing that wonderful thing they did in the old mill over on Old South Willow Street, as they used to call it, which is really
Not
changing
on South Willow, actually on Willow.
on Old Willow Street.
Old Willow Street,
That's changing the character
Hitchcock, I
of
think.
that neighborhood in a good way, I think. And then we have this big project that's in the works for the other side of the railroad tracks, bringing the road over and the pedestrian bridge and all that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what potential does that have for a city like Manchester? I mean, it's literally opening up acres and acres of new territory to the city that we don't even go to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the benefit of those various grants that the city has received, which kudos to the teams that were involved in winning those grants, both Build Back Better to bring resources to the mill yard, and also the Raise Manchester grant that was received, which is what you were talking about. Once we have that new infrastructure in place, it will really unlock a lot of that potential, because it'll be so much more accessible to people from different parts of the city. And it also just brings a renewed attention. And we've seen, with 409 Elm Street, that new building, that very colorful building, that is a great addition. All the progress is going to be very slow, because that's the nature of, development in a city, is it's often slow. But I think that it'll be essentially Manchester's version of the Boston Seaport, in the sense that it was undeveloped, it was not really utilized, but now it's popping off, and I think that's going to happen to the Southern Elm area.
Have any of these things that are proposed to this Raise grant, which is what, 25 million or something?
25 million, with 5 million being matched from the city.
Wow, I mean that's that's
it's a
real
significant
money.
investment.
Is any of these things already in front of your planning board? Is it premature to say?
So the infrastructural improvements don't actually have to come before the planning board specifically, since it's a government-led initiative. We may at some point hear some presentations just for informational purposes, but we don't have to hear any of that. What we would see is if, let's say, a developer has decided that there's a new, that new extension of the rail trail, the South Manchester Rail Trail, which is now going to come up closer to downtown.
Oh, good.
Maybe
Good.
they will want to build some more housing right there, because it's a nice perk for people who live there. We might start to see more applications like that as the infrastructure is developed. So that's kind of that's what's so helpful when you can really invest in infrastructure for your city, is that you wind up teeing up all these other wins. Yeah, it might sound like a lot of money at first, but it pays for itself over time. And that's, when you hear people talk about, oh, I'm, fiscally conservative or whatnot, I think there's a difference between that and being fiscally responsible. Because
I agree.
in order to have a return on investment, you have to make an
invest.
investment. Yeah, so you be smart about it.
But you call it
absolutely,
spending, and it sounds like a terrible thing. It sounds like, your wife off with a checkbook. Right? I mean, it's spending. It's spending.
I wouldn't know about that part, but what I will say is that
I'm in trouble, by the way, for even bringing that up. So,
what I will say is that you have to communicate properly about what you're intending to spend money on. Every year or two, when there are these massive conversations at the municipal level or the state level about the budget, it's going to sound like a huge amount of money. And it is a huge amount of money. And a lot of people are chipping in to help make that happen. But the key is, what are the residents getting for that contribution? What are they getting back? And so I think that's part of that responsibility, is keeping them in mind and also keeping an eye to the future.
Good. You mentioned the South Willow Street Rail Trail, getting that completed, and I would hope that would include the Rockingham Trail, getting that down to the center city and link up with the Heritage Trail and the Piscataquag Trail, which becomes the Goffstown Rail Trail, which is one of my favorites. So, I mean, the potential there, I think, is just enormous.
It's huge.
I mean, it would, for making the city more attractive to young people with bikes and women with strollers, with babies.
So with the rail trails, the City Department of Public Works came out recently with a rail trail master plan, or they call it a trail master plan. And it does take a holistic view of those items, and there is a plan to connect all of those together. And Manchester's in a really fortunate position because we are sort of at the epicenter.
Well, we were a rail hub, literally. The trails all come together.
Right there by the Dental Stadium, not far from there,
Yeah, so
you can go south, north, east, west to, Massachusetts, Canada, Cheshire County and the seacoast.
Well, not with a stroller, but at one time.
At the very least, there's a lot of connectivity that we can really support with these projects, and they are happening. The timeline is something that, again, I'm impatient about. I would like to accelerate some of these wherever possible. And, as somebody who lives in Ward 1, we do have the possibility for rail with trail sort of thing. But with that actively used line, it does take a certain amount of negotiation. And last I heard, that negotiation several years ago probably wasn't really successful. I'd love to give it a go again.
Well,
see what
we
we
have
can
new
do.
ownership there, so maybe there's a better chance.
There is a chance. But then at that point, going back to our surrounding towns and what are they doing? We need Hooksett to build their own portion so that we can connect to that. Otherwise, it's going to be, a trail for us. I guess, even if they don't build their part, if we build ours, we can at least get downtown and to everywhere else that connects to.
That
so
would be really nice.
Would still be a win.
That would be a major advance.
I want to give a shout out to my former alderman, Betsy DeVries, who was an instigator of this whole idea for the city and pushed, and it was disparaged. We can't. Why would we want to do that? That's an expense that's unnecessary. And look at how they're used now. Bob, you use them
absolutely. Yeah, really good. So you got some great ideas. I'm really pleased to hear about them. Let's go back to. Do you expect you have to win a primary in this thing, or do you know, or not?
So I won't know till the filing period closes. They haven't. Anybody who wants to run, feel free to file up until I believe July 21st.
Yeah,
so
you
that's
got
next Friday.
Several days. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's plenty of time. I do have one announced challenger so far, but nobody else has stepped forward to say that they're running. Of course, we could always see a surprise. There won't be a primary if there are only two people running, because the city doesn't want to.
Because it's a nonpartisan.
Yeah, it's
nominally.
Yeah, well, thankfully the city does have nonpartisan races. We can try our best to keep some of the partisan rancor
So there
out.
would have to be a third.
Well, good luck with that. I mean, they're nominally nonpartisan, but they're pretty partisan
they're not
in
not
their
really
character.
nonpartisan,
So.
just
Yeah.
nominally is the operative word. Yeah.
Well, we will see. If there is a third person, there would be a primary. If not, it'll be on to the general election on November 7th.
Yeah. Okay. So are you going to do? You must have been already, in a sense, you're already doing, a boots on the ground campaign if you've been out getting signatures on your petition. So you have to pay that outrageous filing fee.
The outrageous
that's
$50.
a great start.
Yeah.
And I imagine that'll be the heart and soul of what you do to get elected, to keep that up in Ward 1, right?
Absolutely.
Try and knock on every available door you can, and have some visibility around too. Is that right?
Yep, that is correct. That's really how you win a municipal election, at least in my view. I've knocked doors for candidates in the past, and it's always seemed like the most effective manner of getting your point across.
At the level you're talking about, and even above that, for legislators and even state senators, I think it still is, and aldermen at large and all of that.
Yeah, FaceTime with voters is really important, because not only does it help you get your message across, but it helps you understand what matters to people.
What's your experience been? How are you doing it? Are you just going and picking a neighborhood and hitting every door? Are you going by voter lists?
I'm trying to use a voter list and try to talk to people. At least for the petition, I needed to be really targeted.
Oh yeah, you have to use registered voters, or else the name doesn't count.
Exactly, but at the same time, I'm going to. I guess I haven't thought too much about the strategy I'll employ moving forward, but I'm sure I'll be knocking some very committed voters and some folks who are maybe on the fence, and also folks who might be a persuasion vote. Because I think, again, going back to how this is an officially nonpartisan race, people, regardless of their party affiliation, they will all be voting, and I'd like to try to win their support if I can, and if I can't, at least understand their perspectives.
One of our favorite public officials here on the Progress Report is Pat Long. He's been our guest many times, and we just really think he's been a tremendous public servant for the people of Maine, and not only in the alderman, but as a state rep, which has led the delegation for many years. And he's pushing a tough idea, which is financial autonomy for this Board of School Committee, and as part of a package of amendments, which, if the aldermen permit it, which I hope they will go to the voters in the November election to be voted on, to changes in the city charter. You got a position on that?
So at this point, really, my position is that anybody who wants to propose that, which it has worked in other cities, but what we have here also has worked sort of for us for a while. I can understand the arguments for why we might want to change it, but I really hope the people who are promoting that idea are ready to campaign on it and campaign hard, because I have seen already a huge backlash from certain folks who make a lot of noise, but again, when it comes down to political issues in a divided municipality like Manchester, which is probably the most purple out of all of the cities that I've seen in New Hampshire, you really need to have a strategy in place. So
it's going to be
that's what it's going to come down to.
It's going to be a real issue of, can you educate the voters about what this is and how it does not mean your taxes are going to go up if we do this.
Might go down.
Huh?
Might go down.
Possible, but
my point is, you don't know. You don't know.
I don't think the public will understand when Pat Long puts this forward without a serious effort at communication that the tax cap, whether you like it or you don't, is still going to apply to the whole shebang.
That was something that I didn't know about it until I looked into it a little more. I thought it might be a sneaky way for somebody to get around the tax cap, but in fact, it would still apply.
It would still apply,
which is an important feature of it.
Yeah, and definitely. Okay. Well, what else you'd like to talk about in terms of issues, or in terms of your passion for this, or, why run for office? Why not just continue to serve on the planning board?
Yeah, so I was talking with you all earlier. I was thankful to be nominated to a second term on the planning board. So if this does not go well, I will still be serving the city until around 2026. That being said, I'm really hoping to get my hands dirty and get to work on some of the larger issues that we just can't touch when we're on the planning board. And so I would like to make a difference, since Alderman Kaw-uh is moving on. And so this is a great opportunity. You don't always get to pick the timing, but when the opportunity opens up, sometimes you got to dive in.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you. We're coming down to the last 5 minutes.
We are, aren't we?
But this is an opportunity. There's a couple things I want to ask you. First, I want to have you look right in that camera and make your elevator pitch to the voters of Ward 1 as to why they should elect you. And in the course of that, let us know how someone can get involved in your campaign. How can they get in touch with you if they have a question they want to ask? How can they donate to you if they'd like to donate to you? And how could they volunteer? So here's your time.
Sure. Give a little elevator pitch. Yeah, thank you. So, to anybody who is in Ward 1 or who's outside of Ward 1 and interested in following along with our politics, I am really interested in serving as your alderman, because I believe that our ward deserves bold, forward-looking leadership as we tackle the road ahead. I think that Manchester as a whole has so much potential, but we need to be proactive about cultivating it and really shaping the direction in which we go. I have seen so much happening in my role as chair of the planning board, and I'd like to get involved in a greater capacity in the months and years ahead. So I would greatly appreciate your vote, and if you are not ready to consider a vote for me, I'd love to hear from you and talk with you to hear about what are the concerns that you are focused on. You can also reach out to me by emailing bryceformanchester@gmail.com. That's the number 4. You could also visit bryceformanchester.com, same thing, and submit a contact me form there as well. Read more about my priorities. I have a bunch of stuff on there, And in general, yeah, I appreciate your consideration, and thank you both for having me. This has been a great experience.
Well, thank you for stepping up to do this. I think it's a really wonderful thing that people of your
It ain't beanbag.
your clear understanding of things and obvious intelligence and passion. It really is wonderful to have you here. Let's see. Next week we're going to have.
Next week, Senator Lou is going to come and join us. We're going to have the whole team together.
We will not be able to have Senator Lou on our final show because that's his birthday party.
Yep.
Annual.
He has an annual
birthday party. He's had many of them. He's having another one, and that will be the day we are having our last show. And Lou's been a big part of this program, as our viewers know. He's been my co-host, and I'm very fortunate that's been the case for several years. On the first Wednesday of the month, when this guy is off helping the world as a Hibernian.
I don't know about that, but
oh yes, you did. So there you go. That's I guess about it. I thought. Oh God, I don't know. Oh, I want to make a little plug for myself. Can I make a little plug
for you, Bob? Anything?
Yeah, I am for the first time ever leading the service at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Manchester.
Good for you.
This Sunday. You know, Mike, I've argued dozens of cases before juries. I've appeared before Supreme Court and appellate courts, you know, here and in other jurisdictions. And I found this a little alarming. And I thought,
wow.
Well, the answer to that is the juries can't talk back to you. You know, the judge doesn't let them say, that guy's full of, you know. And the appellate judges are always pretty polite because we're all lawyers. So I thought, this is a little bit. But I am going to do the church service on Sunday, and it's going to be at 9 o'clock, and I'm going to talk about the Bible as history. You know, I'm very interested in history, and my two favorite areas of history are the U.S. and Rome, ancient Rome, and I kind of think their path is the path we're following. So I was very interested to talk about what can we know about Jesus, because the only religion that claims they had a God come and live among people in historic times when history was being written are the Christians, and the figure is Jesus. And it turns out there's not a damn thing you can learn about it from anything except the Bible.
Other than, yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
There's nothing else. There's no artifacts. There's no remains of a temple. Nothing. That's it. And then I get very interested in how they put this whole thing together. I love the phrase I left them with. The Bible is the greatest work ever done by a committee, and the committee never met. So anyway,
that's an interesting perspective, Bob. I'm going to ruminate upon that. The committee never met.
Somebody wants to come down and join us for this service at 9 o'clock on Sunday. We'd be happy to welcome you, and the church would certainly like to have you be our guest. So I put that little plug in, and I guess we'll call it another great show. Thank you for being with us, and I wish you absolutely the best as you go forward. And I know it's going to be, I can tell, it's going to be a vigorous and very positive campaign. So good for you. Okay. See you next week, folks, with Lou D'Alessandro.
Thanks for watching. Bye.